which is out there in the media, right? And that is the topic of extremism, violence, and terrorism. And somehow the media or some presidential candidates, they make it as if Muslims are a threat, they are to be feared, and they do not belong to civilized society, whatever language that they use. I'm not going to use emotional answers saying that, no, we are the most peaceful people, right? I could say that. I mean, we are. But I'm going to supplement my answer by giving facts, as much evidence, as much data as possible to justify the answer. That when we look into the 1.7 billion Muslims around the world, yes, they are the good and the bad, right? But the good, like majority, obviously, just like the people of any faith, the good apples and the bad apples. But I'm also going to dwell upon the bad apples which are there in the Muslim society, why they are doing what they are doing. Not just what they are doing. We are going to really briefly touch upon why they are doing some of the acts of hatred and terrorism and extremism. So if we are going to fight those people or any people who are doing these things, we have to know the cause. Knowing the cause will help us to come up with the solutions. So if we are going to categorize the Muslims into 3 different categories, one category would be the category of Muslims who are like minorities living like in the US or in the Europe. The second category of Muslims would be the ones living in the Muslim country and no war or dictatorship is imposed on them. The third category would be the category of Muslims of a few countries in which war, dictatorship, or oppression is imposed on them. So that will help us to identify the problem and to provide the solutions, right? So let's come to the first category of Muslim over here, Muslims. When we look at the Muslims in the USA, I'm just going to summarize by saying that Muslims in the USA, we are a model community when it comes to Muslims, the 7 to 11 million Muslims. When it comes to the data, we are the most charitable. We have the lowest divorce rate. We have one of the highest education when it comes to the different communities. And we are the least threat to the society when it comes to crime, when it comes to terrorism, and when it comes to violence. If Mr. Trump is here, he'll be surprised to find that out, right? And here are some statistics. According to the FBI report from 1980 up until 2005, they found out that all the acts of terrorism which were done on the US soil, Muslims or supposedly Muslims or attributed to the Muslims, there were only about 6% of them, right? Not 94%, not majority, not all of them. Only 6%. And when I say only 6%, we know that even one act of terrorism is too many. Even one loss of life is too many. Even one shedding of blood is too many, too much. I'm just comparing. Based on what is out there, we have to compare and contrast to say that yes, we also have our bad apples, but not to the extent of what the media is showing. According to the AP poll, according to the Yahoo poll, they say that white supremacists are more dangerous to America than the foreign terrorist. When it comes to Europe, in 2009, 2010, and even now, less than 2% of the acts of terrorism done on the soil of the USA, they're done by people who label themselves as Muslims. There were 355 mass shootings last year. Right? 355, there are too many. Only 3 of them, they were attributed to the Muslims. So I'm not saying that Muslims are angels, but what I'm saying is that yes, Muslims have our bad apples, but we are not the majority of the people who are doing these things. So when you compare data by data, community by community, we see that Muslims are a least threat to the society and not what the media is saying out there. This slide may be surprising to some of you. According to the public policy poll, when they took this poll last year, they found out that 57% of the Republicans, they want to replace the US Constitution with Christianity. Okay, so let's compare now to the Muslims who are living in Muslim countries in which war is not imposed on them, right? So there are many such countries. You have Bangladesh, you have Indonesia, you have Turkey, you have Indonesia, Malaysia, different countries. So those countries, they have many different minorities in there. They're accommodating them. They're living in peace and harmony with them. There are always some flares here and there, right? Just like in any country. But as a whole, those countries are living in peace and justice and equality with the rest of the community. War is not imposed on them. Let's come to the third very important category. And that category, my dear guest, is the category of a few countries, the Muslim countries, in which war is imposed on those countries. Like means the country of Iraq, the country of Syria, maybe the country of Afghanistan, and the country of Pakistan. Maybe just a few other countries. So when we look at those countries, some of the questions that may come to your mind is, how come there are so many terrorists, violence, extremism which is out there? All of us, we know that humanity, when we look at our actions, they are always going in action to reaction, reaction to action, and action to reaction. No action is there in its isolation. Whenever we see somebody doing something, we have to always look at the cause for why they are doing what they are doing. Do you all agree with that? That action and reaction is the cycle of the human society. So let's take a look about some of the reasons why extremists are doing why they are doing. Not to justify them, by the way, right? There is no justification in Islam or in Christianity or in Judaism or in humanity for killing any one innocent person. But we have to understand why they are doing what they are doing. Now here is a fact. One statement is going to kind of make that concept clear. I would say that the extremist groups are a reaction to the extreme oppression that they feel is going on over them. It is a reaction to extremism or to oppression that they feel that somebody is doing over them. And here is the reason for it. The drone operators, they could be sitting in Texas or in Europe or in different places. They came up on the news and they said 90% of those killed in the airstrikes were not the intended targets. Then they continue. So these are the statements of the drone operators. We came to the realization that the innocent civilians we were killing only fueled the feeling of hatred that ignited terrorism and groups like ISIS, while others serving as fundamental recruitment tools. My dear guests, it's very important that we love our families, our children, our parents, our spouses. If somebody murders, kills our people, means our innocent, our children, our families, we'll be angry. We'll have feeling of vengeance. We have feeling of hate to the people who are doing this. That's a human reaction. It's not just a Muslim reaction, it's a human psychology. Not sure if they hate us for our freedoms or because the first one is true, the second one is true, so is the third one and the fourth one. When you look into the history of Iraq, and here is a fact. Before 2003, there was not a single act of suicide bombing in the history of Iraq. Yes, not a single act of suicide bombing in the history of Iraq. And same thing we could say of many countries that are doing this. So it's important. I'm not saying that, yes, this is an excuse. But even Tony Blair, he made a statement to the same effect, that the groups who are doing extremism, they are reacting to the violence that are done by the British and by the US. It's a fact. And Hillary Clinton, and we have the video in which she said,
So if you think if we walked away from this, didn't give them money today, it would be worse for us from a security standpoint?
I do. We're building a relationship that just did not exist. I said in our last trip when you were with me that we had a huge trust deficit, in part because the United States had, to be fair, we had helped to create the problem we're now fighting.
How?
Because when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, we had this brilliant idea that we were going to come to Pakistan and create a force of mujahideen, equip them with Stinger missiles and everything else to go after the Soviets inside Afghanistan. And we were successful. The Soviets left Afghanistan, and then we said, great, goodbye, leaving these trained people who were fanatical in Afghanistan and Pakistan, leaving them well armed, creating a mess, frankly, that at the time we didn't really recognize. We were just so happy to see the Soviet Union fall, and we thought, okay, fine, we're okay now. Everything's going to be so much better. Now you look back, the people we're fighting today, we were supporting in the fight against the Soviets.
So it's important that for any action, there is a cause. For any cause, there is a reaction. And when we are going to take away the reaction, we have to make sure we have to identify the cause. And that cause is obviously that they feel that oppression is going on. It's not that they're feeling. When they see that millions of their family members are lost because of drone missiles and by bombing, and resources are being taken away, occupation is taking place, people are imposing dictators on them by the foreign powers. Human reaction is that people get angry, they have vengeance, and sometimes they take this vengeance in not the right way. So this is what human reaction. This is what the Quran teaches. The Quran says in chapter number 2, verse number 190, that fight in the cause of God for those who fight against you, but do not go to extreme, because God does not love the extremist. This is the gold standard of Islam. Not human emotions, not feeling of vengeance, not our own shortcomings or culture. This is the gold standard that God has given. So God is saying in that chapter of the Quran, in that verse of the Quran, chapter 2, verse number 190, that if war is imposed on you, or somebody is trying to kill you, or somebody is trying to compromise your life, your property, your family, you have the God-given right to defend yourselves. For example, at 2 a.m. at night, you hear a bang on your door. And when you look and you see that there are people out there, maybe they're gang members, like bad people trying to compromise and break down your door and come inside, what you do is, obviously, if you have an alarm system, you push the button, you call 911. If you have a baseball bat, you make sure you hold it, right? You want to defend yourself, your property, and your family. Self-defense, it's a human nature. So Islam is saying that yes, in self-defense, you have the right to take up arms. But God is saying very, very clear, the gold standard of Islam is saying that even in a self-defense, do not go to extreme, because God does not love the extremist. I'm quoting you from the Quran. So what are some of the extreme ways that God wants us to avoid? Chapter number 5 of the Quran, verse number 32, it says that taking the life of one innocent person is like taking the life of all of humanity. Saving one life is like saving the life of all of humanity. And that is what Islam teaches. Muhammad, peace be upon him, in one of his defensive battles, he saw a woman dead. He became angry and he called his companions and he told them that even in a war, do not kill women and children. That means do not kill non-combatants. That means in Islam there is no such thing as carpet bombing. In Islam there is no such thing as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There is no such thing in Islam that even if the enemy comes and touches and harms and destroys a civilian population, Islam does not give Muslims the right to go and harm or to kill even one single civilian of the enemy population. And that is what Islam teaches. Islam teaches that you cannot destroy the resources of the civilians of the enemy population, means the crops, the animals, the water resources, the electrical resources. Islam, that's what it teaches, even in a just war. And last but not the least, it says in the Quran, chapter number 8, verse number 61, that if the enemy drops their weapons and incline towards peace, you also incline towards peace. Do not shoot them in the back. Incline towards peace. Sit down with them. Write down a peace treaty. Befriend them. Stop the war. You know, why do you think they're not fighting against the Chinese or Russians, for example? Why are they always coming to attack the Europeans, the Americans, the Canadians, and the Australians? Because they see that they are the ones who have compromised their families, their land, and their resources. I'm not justifying what they're doing, but it's very important. Human psychology, right? Cause and effect.